You're back to where you belong, back there on the grass. Welcome to the Computer Chronicles. I'm Stuart Chaffee, and this is Gary Kildall, whom I'm trying to beat in a game of Pong.
Pay attention.
Pong is the granddaddy of all computer games, and that's the subject of our program today, computer games. And Gary, computer games, in fact, were important, weren't they, in getting the whole personal computer thing going?
Well, they certainly were a part of it. One of the unique aspects of a personal computer is that it often has bitmap color graphics, like the Apple II, for example. And that way you can do very dynamic things, games that you couldn't do, say, with a teletype style or scrolling display you would find in a larger computer system. This particular game, obviously, is a pretty old vintage, and they've gotten a lot more sophisticated since then, and we're going to see some of that today.
Indeed, we've got a very exciting show. We'll be meeting some of the superstars of computer game programming from Electronic Arts, from Atari, and from Activision. And while the idea of computers in games may be new, the idea of people playing games with machines is not really new.
That was a clip from the Computer Chronicles, a half-hour show that was broadcast on PBS between 1983 and 2002. It was hosted by Stuart Chaffee. He was about 40 and change, he looks like. Looks like the kind of guy you wouldn't expect to be really into computers at all. But man, was he. He hosted that show for almost 20 years. And it's an impressive bit of old nostalgia, especially if you just love old computing and old PCs. These videos are all over YouTube. They're definitely worth burning an afternoon just kind of flicking through them to see what they're all about. And what's great about these episodes is they're so excited on the newest, the latest, and the greatest. And as a kid who grew up in that era, I was the same. I mean, I loved my Nintendo, I loved my SNES, but the day my mom brought home our own PC in 1996, I was hooked. I wanted to know everything about it. I wanted to learn how it worked, what it did, the components. And while I'm not as big of a PC fiddler or tuner as many of my guests are, I still had a fascination with those gray boxes and all of the wonders that were inside. On today's episode of A Gamer Looks at 40, we're going to look at early PC gaming. PC gaming from the very beginning in the mid-'80s, going all the way up until Doom era. That's kind of where this is going to stop. We're covering a wide array of topics, subjects, and games. So let's slide in that boot disk, hit that power button, and boot up into Windows 3.1 as we take a look at the early days of PC gaming. First up, Adam from the Retro Bygones Gaming Podcast, and following him is Ian, also known as TeacherBloke85 on Twitter, share their first experiences with PC gaming. And I gotta tell you, they're talking about things I didn't even know existed. And I should know. I'm the host. I should be looking these things up beforehand. And both of these conversations actually came from, hey, what was your first entry point into gaming? And they went places I did not expect. Yep. So we're here to talk a bit about an era that I know tangentially, but I don't have a ton of experience with, which is the world of PC gaming. Ever since from the beginning to current day, I will ask you the dorky question. What was your first computer?
Ooh. Well, my first home computer was a Commodore 64.
Perfect. Yeah, cool, man. Very nice.
And then my first PC was that Tandy 1000.
Nice. Very nice. Mine was that 486. I had a 486 DX2. It was
66, because that's what I had as well.
I think it might have been a 66. It ran Windows 3.11.
Oh, I at least had Windows 95.
Yeah, my Windows 95 was a 66 megahertz. I don't remember what the clock speed on the old Packard Bell was. 2-speed CD-ROM drive came with 4 megs of RAM, which I upped to 20 a couple years later. Felt like I was the king of the world. Yeah, man. So a Commodore 64. What did you play on it? I'm assuming you played games on it. And that thing had a ton of games on it.
Well,
I mean, that was
my cousins were into the BBSing and downloading of content, and they had probably bought 30 or 40 different games, everything from Skate or Die to all of the like the Epics games, the summer games, winter games. Tons of arcade games like Bad Dudes and Karnov, which was a terrible port. But they downloaded so much stuff that at one point in time I got to bring home their disk drive and their box of discs, and I spent a summer just kind of absorbing all of that. And my mom hated it so much that she gave it back to my uncle.
You had to take this thing back. Adam's spending way too much time on the Commodore. So it sounds like your early forays into gaming were almost computer based.
Yeah, it was back when things came on tapes, and I remember quite clearly that going into some of the shops where you could buy the tapes and having to look at the cover art and thinking, wow, this looks amazing, but then having to look at the top to see what colour was there, and it was orange if it was compatible with Amstrad, yellow for Spectrum and red for Commodore, and finding a tape and thinking, oh, that looks great, but then seeing at the top, oh, that's a red band, that's for Commodore 64, I don't have one of those. But then chances are you'd be able to find the same game on a format that you had, and I don't know if there was any particular fandom around those, computers, but I was too young to know if there was. So
yeah. I just find it very interesting that you don't hear that very often. You hear like Nintendo or Atari, but you were going way back. You talk about the Spectrum and those really, really old days of consoles.
Yeah, I'm just old.
Well, I mean, I was saying you have a different perspective.
Yeah.
I think
that's the way it was here in the UK. There was a big push on, the Amstrad, the Spectrum, and I never actually heard of anyone with a Commodore, although that could be, just the company I kept at the time.
Sure.
I will say a few years back now, for my 30th birthday, completely out of the blue, so it seemed to me, following on from one tiny conversation, my girlfriend surprised me with a ZX Spectrum as my present, and I was absolutely over the moon.
Yeah, that's cool. That's very cool. Do you still have any of those old consoles?
Yeah, I've got the Amstrad actually down here, the classic one that I played on as a kid, and still got the Spectrum that my girlfriend got for me.
That's neat.
Yeah, I'm surrounded by classic consoles at the moment.
Next up, Justin from the Baseball and Whatever podcast talks about the first time he received a color computer. Not black and white, friends. Color. Huge advancements in the world of computing. And then the fellows from New Dad Gaming podcast, Jeff and Trevor, share some stories of their very first computers.
So I want to say my grandparents gave us their old, I believe it was a Macintosh Classic from like 1990. And it was a black and white computer. I want to say I was like 4, maybe when we got it. It had a game called Glider on it, where you were a paper airplane and you were trying to get from room to room in a house. And then a couple years later, we got our first, I think it was an IBM PC, and it had a color screen. And the fact that it had a color screen just blew my mind. I was like, this is like some next level stuff here. So, my uncle gave us a shareware version of Doom, and I was kind of off and running at that point. I was hooked. It was nothing that I ever seen, because at that point I only had my parents' NES, and to go from Mario, Super Mario Brothers or Duck Hunt to Doom, it blew me away. It's, games could do this nowadays, so.
Do you guys remember your first PCs?
Yes.
First computer. Yeah. Do you guys remember the specs of them, or at least the makers? And
Pentium 2, baby. Pentium 2.
Ooh, wow.
Fancy
okay.
boy.
I really.
I have no clue. All I know is that it was Windows 3.1.
Yes.
And it was styled like an actual book with like a binder that you could like flip pages through. And that's how
What?
Yeah, I think it was like kind of a special mode for people who didn't know how to use computers. And that's
okay.
the only way I'd ever access the computer. So when I went to another computer, it's like, where's the pages? I don't understand how to do anything.
Should bring that mode back for some people.
Yeah.
So
Although to
right.
get into games, you had to do DOS. So you had to exit out of all of that and then type in commands. You know,
Yep.
get to feel like a hacker for 3
/
seconds before you play
right.
like Leisure Suit Larry or something.
yeah.
What about you, Jeff?
So, like I mentioned, Pentium 2. So, like, my dad was really into tech toys. He wasn't into consoles, but he was into computers for whatever reason. And I remember him getting this computer, and it was the family computer, but only he used it, and he allowed me to game on it. But he bought it for voice to text, which existed
Whoa.
early in the 90s for an ungodly price tag. But he got it through his company, and I remember him trying to train the thing for like 16 hours a day, and it wasn't very good. Like, it was horrible. But it had enough power. Like, it had like, I think it was a sound card that was in it, like Sound Blaster or whatever it was called.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I remember going into games, and that Sound Blaster, that sound card, a lot of the games at that time just didn't take advantage or didn't know what it was, and they wouldn't run. So that was like my first experience of like trying to navigate that space, because he wouldn't help me. He didn't know like what I was doing in the gaming world. He was on the, the PC software other side of things. So I remember being in DOS a lot, and that blue screen where it was like the boot BIOS or whatever, just trying to figure out how everything worked. So those were like, I don't know. I tell my kids sometimes, and they're like, "What are you talking about?" And I'm that old guy saying, "Back in my day, right?" Like,
Yep.
it was one of those
Back
things.
in my day,
you could just
I had to
break
yeah.
the computer. So,
Oh, you could absolutely do that. I mean, you're talking about sound blasters and things that, like all those peripherals that just didn't plug and play. This is plug and play. It wasn't really a thing. Like you said, you'd have to like figure out the right drivers. And I remember my first computer was a Packard Bell. It was a 486 DX2.
oh wow,
It was a 66 megahertz. I'm pretty confident it was 66 megahertz. It had 4 meg of RAM. Had a 2-speed CD-ROM drive, blazing fast.
Yes.
Super double fast. Speed CD drive. Yes, double fast and single fast. And it had like sound and all that. And it had a 2400 baud modem.
Oh yeah,
That was part of the motherboard. And when I finally upgraded to a 56K modem, I had to like take off jumpers on the motherboard and do like surgery and all this madness to get my 56K to run properly. Next up, Ryan, also known as Retro Game Brews on Twitter, and the host of the brand new Gamers Week podcast, more about that later in the show, shares some insights and some memories about his first forays into computer gaming. And then Raji, also known as Super Nintendo Bros on Twitch, an awesome streamer, check him out. He talks a bit about internet connectivity. Yes, you could still do that back in those days. And finally, my brother and I share a bit about our first interactions with the home computer. So I'd love to now pivot over to the PC era. That's something I've been talking to a few people about. And I will ask this question first. What was your first PC?
I think it was, I want to say it was a Tandy or an Apple II. I was very young. My dad had bought it, and it was very, very basic from my recollection of it. And the two things that I would use the system for it was to play Wheel of Fortune with my mom, which came on a 5 1/4 floppy.
Nice.
And then there was Jeopardy as well, which I didn't really know what I was doing, but I would type stuff.
Type and hope for the best.
Right. So both of those are on a 5 1/4 floppy, and we used to go nuts with that. Bother our mom all the time because my mom was the one who would play with us because I think my dad at the time was working hellish hours at work. So this was our consolation prize for not seeing dad as much. But, very, very basic. We're talking like, 87, 88.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. So that was young.
Yep.
What was the first PC do you remember really getting into that was kind of like your own? Because you listed a few games out here that were kind of more of the mid to late 90s kind of thing.
Yep. So we had, if I remember, it was a Hewlett-Packard. And it was one of those ones where I remember going with my father to, I think it was CompUSA at the time.
Yeah.
Which I don't even know if they're around anymore.
No, I don't think they are.
Yeah. And so my dad, of course, worked for Kodak at the time. So he's very familiar with computers and the things that he would use it for. So he opted for a pre-build with that, of course. And I remember getting it home, him basically telling us, like, you are not allowed to touch this unless I am around.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Yeah.
And so that was a part of like the introduction into things like Minesweeper and Solitaire. We would play on it. It's something to do. But of course, my dad was probably using it more for his own purposes.
Sure.
But then as I got into around the age of 9 or so, we started looking into more of the gaming aspect of that. And so my dad started to go out and with us and purchase games. So again, we would go to things like CompUSA, Circuit City in order to pick up some of those games. And, he was somebody at the time that I think secretly was a gamer too.
Nice.
So walking up and down the aisles, and of course, you would go when you were a kid to Toys R Us and you would see all of that one display where you would pick out the game itself. This time around with PC games, they were in a sealed box that were sitting on a shelf. So you got to pick it up and like read about it. Long before you got a chance to play it. So that was kind of cool too, is to spend some time in that aisle. And of course, most of the games that you purchased were ones that were physically appealing at first as far as the box was concerned.
Yeah.
So not all of them were winners, but man, there were some really great games at that time that not only did you get involved in the games, but at the time, computers were something that was ubiquitous in everyone's household. So getting a chance to learn how to use it, becoming far more familiar with it, allowed me to become comfortable with technology at a younger age, which I think was great.
Which is really great. Yeah, because in that era, especially as we moved into, like middle school and high school and that era, they were starting to push us into those directions. I remember taking classes in, basic computing, and like in middle school where they put me in front of an Apple II and I had to learn how to use a word processor. So having that advantage at home where you're already a little familiar with that was definitely, I think, an advantage. And I love the memory of those big boxes, for the PC games. Oh man, those boxes were gorgeous. I just remember these huge, and they have these little discs in them, but for some reason you had these amazing big boxes that just seemed really impressive, and it felt like you were buying an actual thing, as opposed to like a program. It was definitely more of an experience.
This week on the Computer Chronicles, Internet TV. We'll show you Web TV, a new gadget that lets you surf the web on your television set. How do you watch TV on the net? Using a technology called video streaming. We'll show you several of the best plugins. This is Intercasting, Intel's approach to merging television and computers. And check this out, the first ever full-time television channel on the web. Plus a look at a new kind of TV computer, the information appliance, and the new high-speed internet highways, at home, and DirectPC. All this and Giles Online, this week's computer news, my pick of the week, all coming up next on the Computer Chronicles.
Cool, man. So also, before we kind of got on, we were talking a little bit about, I was going to talk about PC games. And did you have a decent PC back in those days? Kind of in that like mid-90s era?
We got our first PC, and I remember it being a Packard Bell, and that was the first PC our family got. Anybody that I knew in my family had. And I'm trying to remember, I think it came with, my God, with the first thing we did, it was Windows 3.1. It's that old.
And for its time, it was like I think it was a Best Buy purchase. So it was, it could run a lot of stuff. I never was a hardcore PC gamer because I had the Nintendo console. I didn't really understand it, but the ones I did get into, and I had a buddy that got me into these, was you ever heard of a game called Descent?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
like a flying shooter type game, and it was really amazing. We had dial-up modems in the computer, and we're able to dial directly from my house to his house and play a game.
Awesome.
And it was like, oh my God, what is this? That was the first online experience I'd ever seen. And, that was the beginning of online gaming. But how good that thing worked with a dial-up modem. No, you didn't notice lag within the game. We're flying these spaceships around. We could type to each other. Raddest thing ever. Like, that was the big one for me.
Oh my gosh, I remember that. I remember when I got my upgrade to 56K, I just thought, again, it's not going to get better than this. This is it. This is all the speed I'll need.
Oh, I distinctly, speaking of that, not getting too far off track again here, but I distinctly remember an article in a magazine around that time with 56K, I think it was, and it was the emergence of this idea that you could stream video on the internet. You could stream. What is streaming? That was a new idea, first of all. But they were saying, yeah, check out this. They're testing out this broadband thing where it's a coaxial cable and it can carry whatever, like 100 times the amount of data. And they said, in the future, we might be able to we think we're going to transport live video like on your television. I'm like, that's never going to happen. Because you ever try to download anything on a modem? It's like an image took, it felt like it took forever. It's just a GIF,
Yeah, I remember when I was in college, I lived at home during college, but I spent most of my time in the radio station because I was running the radio station at the time.
Oh, nice.
And we had like a T1 line, like going into the radio station that was like no one noticed it. No one knew it was there. So we would just sit there and download music and movies. We'd always have a movie playing in the radio station, in the library where all the CDs and such were. Some movie we stole. And all the music we played were all stolen from Napster, and it's
the Wild West of the internet. Napster.
It was legitimately the Wild West of the internet. It was, but having a T1 line was just like
that term. If you drop that, if I hear that, they got a T1 line at this, at our school. Somebody said, I'm like, oh my God, a T1. That's nuts, man. It's like baller.
Yeah, it is legitimately.
What does that mean nowadays? I wonder. What kind of connection is that?
It's a 1.5 meg connection, but it's extremely stable. So
1.5, nice.
Yep, it's 1.5. Yeah, it's extremely stable though. It's a very, very low lag because it's a dedicated line. You're not sharing it with anybody. So that's kind of what it is. I don't know what the campus had, but again, I went to an engineering school, and not to get too off topic, but I went to an engineering school, and this is game related.
That's your show. Do what you want.
I know. That's exactly. Most schools have football teams and such. We didn't have a football team. There was no football team. There's a basketball team, but we're like Division 3. Like, no one cared about sports. All we cared about was playing Counter-Strike in the dorms on the high-speed internet that was pumped into every dorm room. And at some point, after I had left, the school was required by like the RIAA, like the recording industry, because there was hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of gigs worth of pirated music.
Oh no!
Just coursing through the veins of the network, that they're required to do something about it, like close ports. Because again, this is a little techie and dorky, but all the ports are open. There's no network security. Yeah, there's just they just closed all the ports, but then for some reason they forgot about the radio station. We still had open access to everything.
And what was network security back then?
Yeah, exactly.
Even your best IT people, like, and the tools available, like, you couldn't close off stuff as like they can now.
No, they had to do something about it because of some. It was in the news and whatnot, so it was a.
That's crazy.
Yep.
Growing up, because of you, the only video games I ever knew were like, you had the original NES and you had Super Nintendo. So I only knew video games from like consoles. And oddly enough, when we visited my godmother, our cousins Kevin and Kyle, Kevin had a Commodore, and I didn't understand even what that was. And I'm one of those rare millennials that actually did play with B discs. That actually got into a B drive. People are like, "Do you know what a floppy disk is?" And I'm like, "I sure do." So my first foray into PC gaming was from the Commodore, and I played Paperboy, and I got kind of good at it. And that was like my first early memory of playing PC games, and I didn't even understand. Like, I don't know what this means. Like, I just only have. I thought video games come from a video game system. I just didn't understand it, but I to this day I am that idiot or annoying guy or jerk that's good at Paperboy.
You're strangely good at it.
I'm strangely good at it, and
It's
I am also
very odd.
And when people are struggling with it, I go, "Oh, come on, it's not that hard," and I annoy them more. I am that person.
Yeah. It is a bizarre skill.
Yeah.
That's like me in Marble Madness. It's a game I'm bizarrely good at for no reason. After the break, we talk about games. Lots and lots of games. My brother Bobby continues the conversation after this. Just wanted to thank Pete, Harney, and Ryan, aka Retro Game Brews, on Twitter, Twitch, and anywhere he has a social media presence. These fine gentlemen are our very first patrons, and will be receiving perks like early access to shows, shoutouts like this, and 2 exclusive podcasts only for members. If you would like to join these pillars of society and supporting the show, go to patreon.com/agamerlooksat40 to check out the tiers, the perks, and the benefits of supporting the show with both your listenership and your hard-earned dollar. Thanks again to both Ryan and Pete. Back to the show. And the pack itself came with like all sorts of educational software, like Dinosaur 3D, which was great.
Yes.
Yes. It came with the underwater adventure, if I remember correctly, a 3D body, something where you could look at organs.
Yes. Yeah.
Speed, which was like an interactive movie.
Kinda. Yeah. They try to teach physics, but very, very little.
I think Speed actually was an IMAX movie that they compressed to like this tiny, ridiculously small thumbnail that was played video.
Yeah.
But anyway, and finally, I think there was also Space Adventure.
Did you mention 3D Dinosaur Adventure? Because that was a big one. Okay.
Oh yeah.
Cool. Yeah,
I love that.
And people actually still remember that. Like, you talk to random people. For whatever reason, that one stuck with people. I don't know why. I think because it was the perfect timing because of Jurassic Park. I think that
that's a good point.
Yeah, I think so. I think it was around 93 or so. Yeah.
It was neat. You could kind of sort of navigate this park and learn about. It was actually a cool presentation.
Yeah.
And then there was Sports Illustrated. There was a sports almanac that had like videos of sporting things.
And it was from Sports Illustrated, was it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sports Illustrated.
That was a big deal.
Yep.
Go ahead. Yeah, they were the Knowledge Adventure series. Yeah. I was just remembering the name of the company. Yeah.
Oh, you're right. It was Knowledge Adventure.
Yeah.
And then finally, we had a Grollier's encyclopedia, as was the time.
Yes, and I think Mom might have ordered that special because it was a big deal. Yeah.
It came with something, but then Mom ordered something more updated a couple years later.
Right. Right. And then we got Encarta later. Yeah.
Encarta. That's probably what we had later.
Yeah. But Grolier was a big deal because, internet wasn't what we know today. So to have like an encyclopedia on CD-ROM was a humongous advantage.
It was huge. It was a big deal.
Literally, before that, for you young folks listening, you had to order encyclopedias in the mail to get the whole series in a book.
Or go to the library
go to the library and get theirs.
Flick through an encyclopedia. Mm-hmm. That was the big deal. Our grandfather had an encyclopedia.
Yeah.
There's a whole big shelf full of volumes in it. Oh, that's a cool memory. Next up, Andy, host of the Cafe BTW podcast / Twitch stream on Saturday mornings, and also known as Love Retro BTW on Twitter, shares some of his first experiences playing PC games and what they meant to him. And then Adam rejoins the show to not only talk about his first time playing point-and-click adventures, but how playing PC games made him different than anybody else in his school?
Well, I think that the PC games were just, they could do more. You know, they gave you that extra. So the arcade was still king, sort of. And then, but the PC games just had more depth to them. And like, there's games like as far back as Oregon Trail, which was a game that I vividly remember playing on the PC in the 80s. And it's a game that started, I believe, text-based in the 70s. And let's talk about that. Have you ever heard of a MUD, a multi-user dungeon? That is what they call the text-based games, a MUD. Have you ever heard that?
I'm somewhat familiar.
Yeah. So there's games like Zork, which was 1980. I played that a little bit. I played some text-based, but not. I tried that in a later time. Like it must have been like the later 80s, but I played those earlier games, you know, because they were still really cool. There's another game that I have a vivid memory of my uncle, who I had no idea, and this is 86 or 7, and he's playing Rogue, which is an amazing game that actually did have graphics, and it was like a game where you would go through different, it was almost felt like a dungeon, the first time you were dungeon crawling in a game. And you could look it up, it's called Rogue, and it was like, and it blew me away that my uncle, who worked for the government, was like into this. Like I was like, wow, my uncle really likes this. I don't see old people like games, you know? So it was like, it really blew me away. And then we can talk about later games like Sim City 1989 is a game that blew me away because it was the first like top-down strategy game where you were like in a god position. You know, like Populous too, if you've heard of Populous, was also another.
Oh yeah. Yep, absolutely.
And remember, this is before operating systems. So you had to use DOS. And what you were doing as a gamer back then was you were putting in code to run the game. So that's what people don't realize, is that you were coding the game to play. You know what I mean?
That's really cool, man.
Think about that.
Yeah, that's actually really crazy. And modern, you know, especially in modern, or even, man, when I first got my first PC, I was probably in high school. So like mid 90s, Packard Bell 486. There was nowhere near that. You know, obviously you still had installers, right? You can install a game, it popped up, you hit the icon, and away you were going. Back in those early days, man, you were coding. Cool. So, let's kind of move forward then. So Commodore 64, sounds like kind of in the PC world, you moved on to like traditional PCs. It sounds like you mentioned your Tandy.
Yep.
Were you playing a lot of games on that? I don't even know what's possible on that thing.
Not a whole lot.
I was going to say, I don't know if that's like, yeah.
It had 256 kilobytes of RAM and an 8088 processor.
Oof.
Now, I also played Maniac Mansion on it. So that was the one tie-in from the Commodore 64. But the kind of games I played on it were like Frightmare, the first John Madden football.
Nice.
Some of the early Sierra point and clicks, the Black Cauldron. I played the first Space Quest on that, but really, really slowly.
Yeah.
I remember because I had so little RAM, most games I had to play them in CGA mode. I couldn't even play them in Tandy graphics mode, which was like 16 color EGA.
Yeah.
Like, so yeah.
Barely chugging along.
Yeah.
What early point and clicks were there on the Tandy? Because I imagine, you know, obviously graphical interface is important for a point and click. Was it super rudimentary? I mean, I guess Maniac Mansion was running on Commodore 64,
Mansion,
so yeah.
Zach McCracken.
Oh, sure. Okay. Yeah.
I think the first two Space Quest and the first two Police Quests played on it. I played Iceman on it as well. That was a Sierra adventure that everybody hates. But when you have a computer that was so limited, you kind of ended up playing games that other kids really didn't.
Right. And that's actually cool because I think it gives you a different perspective than a lot of kids who, wow, the Tandy was, gosh, what year was all that at this point?
That started in like 88, 89, but I didn't get mine until like 91, 92.
Wow. Okay. Yeah.
Yep.
I'm just trying to think and you got kids who are playing, of course, 91, 92. You're firmly in 16-bit land at that point.
Almost 486 land.
Yep. Yeah, and in the console world, you're with the NES and Super Nintendo crowd.
So
and I don't know where you were with that, but
I did have by '92. I did have a Sega Genesis. My brother and I pitched in together and bought a Sega Genesis.
Cool. Cool. So at least you had that kind of commonality with the kids. But before then, it sounds like you were playing PC games and everybody else was on Nintendo. Was that ever a thing with like your friends, or did you find a group of kids who maybe had that hardware you had?
Luckily, I had one friend that was like, I would say, my PC gaming Atari 7800 sensei. He was the guy he was my most eccentric friend. And he was the one that I shared all the PC memories with. Everybody else in my neighborhood pretty much had NESs. Right. A couple of them actually had Sega Master Systems, which was wild because I don't know anybody else who has them. But John moved to my town in '92. And that was right around the same time I got the Tandy 1000. So he would make me copies of software all the time. And he showed me things that I had never played before.
That's really interesting. And I like the fact that, I find it at least interesting that, of course, in the Nintendo console world, it was you'd borrow games from friends and you have to give it back. Your friends were just giving you copies of software.
Yeah.
That's actually pretty interesting.
And even when you went to the store and your buddies were paying $40-$50 for NES games, I was paying like $10, $15 for PC games.
Wow. Yeah, that's so interesting. So it was definitely more value, but you still had some great experiences. So it's not like you were missing out on games. You were still having a great time in this other medium.
It was a totally different experience than all my friends were having. So when they were playing Mega Man and Castlevania, John was showing me the AD&D games, like Champions of Kryn and Eye of the Beholder, and then really odd games that I'm still not totally into, but they were interesting because of how excited about them he was, like Starflight and Star Control, some of these larger space simulators and RPGs. If it wasn't for him, I wouldn't know anything about those.
And it's always cool to have that friend who introduces you to that stuff. That is really nice that you were able to keep that connection, have that connection, right? And allow that connection to shape the games you play and the experiences. Yeah, because I do like these conversations. Because again, I had no connection. Again, I got my first computer, I want to say 96. It sounds about 95, 96. So. Coming up next, Justin from the Baseball and Whatever podcast returns to the show to talk about games as opposed to hardware, and then Adam rejoins the show to also talk about some of the games that influenced them during this PC gaming era, as well as one title in particular that is forever seared into my memory. Oh man! Also, you mentioned in our kind of our debrief was Commander Keen.
Yeah, so I feel like I played that a lot. It wasn't until I was a little bit older that I realized, id Software had stuff to do with Commander Keen, right? So that kind of was shocking to me. I remember I had Wolfenstein 3D, and I remember coming across one of the levels where you find Keen in the game. I want to say like he's hung up or something, like kind of weirdly, creepily, kind of thrown in there. And then I kind of dove back into Commander Keen. But yeah, it was a nice little palate cleanser after playing all these first person shooters as a kid. And then to go into a platformer that's brightly colored and it's got these goofy looking aliens, and the controls were probably a little rough if I were to go back and try it now. I remember it was like the key, the arrow keys, and then like control to jump, and that was about it. I think there might have been like a ray gun or something you get at some point, but yeah, like I fondly look back at those games to the point where I want to say they released a few of the later ones on the Nintendo Switch, and I saw that and I immediately bought it because I'm like, I need to see if this is the one I had. And
oh wow,
it wasn't. It definitely wasn't the one I had, because I'm like, oh, this doesn't play like I remember, or it was just me being a kid thinking it was great, so
sure.
But yeah, definitely another game I definitely look back fondly on for sure.
Right on. I never really got a chance to play many of the Commander Keen games, so I know them by reputation. So
yeah,
I mean, obviously, there's nothing's going to stack up with a Mario or that sort of thing, but how did that kind of rank up, I guess, in that world of platformers?
Ooh, that, I would say the feel to it, and maybe this is because I was using a keyboard, but definitely didn't have the feel to something like Super Mario Brothers or even Super Mario World at that point. The art style and the art direction was what I kind of liked about it, just because it had that sci-fi tinge to it, and it also had a lot of this kid that's going to outer space, but his astronaut helmet is like a football helmet, and his spaceship looks like something I would have built out of stuff I found in my garage, stuff like that. So I enjoyed it for that aspect anyway.
That's cool. Yeah, kind of like that homegrown kind of
exactly.
Yeah, a little more like imaginative sort of like a nostalgic feel. That's cool. Okay,
for sure.
Yeah. Very nice. Awesome, man. Any other games from that era, that PC era, that you played a lot of?
Yeah, I mean, Dark Forces was another big one for me. I still am. I'm a still huge Star Wars nerd. I the fact that it was a first-person shooter with a Star Wars skin on top of it just was amazing to me. I so badly wanted the sequel trilogy that came out to somehow include Kyle Katarn in them. I knew it wasn't going to, but I kept in the dark recesses of my mind. I'm like, oh, they're gonna somehow throw some little Easter egg about Kyle Katarn in these, and of course they didn't. But that was a big one for me. Corridor 7 was another first-person shooter. I don't think many people know that one. That was kind of a sci-fi one. It was fine. It wasn't anything too crazy. But the other PC game, and this is more mid 90s to end of the 90s, that for me was Warcraft 2. And the only reason that stands out in my friends and I from grade school still talk about this to this day is we had a computer club. I would have been in 6th grade, I think, when we started playing this, and our computer club teacher set up a LAN in the computer lab, and we all this was the time of, gosh, would that have been the IMAX, like the blue in the cherry colored IMAX were big. So he set up a LAN in the computer lab, and every Wednesday after school we'd have, 5 or 6 kids would go down, we'd all sign in, and we would play Warcraft, and it would be like a 6-on-1 match against our teacher, and we never beat him. It took us all of 6th grade. We never beat him once. So
wow.
We still, if I could get that running on a PC nowadays, which I'm not good at, I'm more of a console guy now because I'm too afraid I'm going to break something on a PC, but if I could get that running again just to hear those sounds again, it would take me instantly back. That is something I definitely look back fondly on for sure.
That's funny. He had no mercy on you guys.
No.
None.
And then, we started looking up cheats because this was the time of the internet where, your game sages, and I think, which eventually became IGN, I think. But we would look up cheats, but then the cheats didn't really help you in the game. It kind of gave everyone access to abundant resources and things. So we were just helping him out, and he would wipe the floor with us every week, every week. So
wow, that's crazy. Yeah. That's, what? I half respect that, half kind of loathe it. Like, come on, give the kids one win. But also, hey, you had to earn it, right? Well, if you're going to win.
And then, of course, we'd have a couple kids who would try and make side deals, and they would kind of, they'd turn they would turn on us and try and join his side, but then he'd wipe him out in the end. And it's like, see, that serves you right. Exactly.
Treacherous.
It got downright dirty at sometimes, but we had a blast. So
that sounds like a lot of fun.
It was.
Very cool. So let's actually pivot. Any other games from kind of like that era that you really fell in love with and played a lot before we kind of move on to the console side of the conversation?
Space shooters, I would say, is the main would be another area in which I really loved PC games for like Star Wars X-Wing and TIE Fighter. Those are both phenomenal games. Probably to me, the best Star Wars games that exist, even up to this date. You will not find a better space simulator for, I would say, even into the PS5 generation. It is that good. And then like the Wing Commander series, I had 1, 2, and Armada. Mm-hmm. And those were all more story based. I wouldn't say the shooting, the space shooting element was as good as Wing Commander or TIE Fighter, but it was very story driven. I'm always driven to games that have the good storylines, and Origin games did that a lot.
Mm-hmm. No, that's very cool. Yeah, I was never big into the space shooters as a kid on the PCs and stuff. That was really most of my play was on the consoles, but I know people who played a lot of X-Wing, I think it is, and tons of that. Any other games you remember from that Commodore 64 to kind of move through the lineage?
Have you heard of Mission Impossible?
Not the game. Is it a tie-in to the? Wasn't the movies at the time? Was
It's
it a show?
not. It's an Epix game, and it's a platformer. It's like a flick screen platformer. So you have to search an entire compound for puzzle pieces to decode the bad guy Adam Bender's code to get into his door to stop him from basically destroying the world. It's fun. And it's beyond its time. It was from 1984, and it is spectacular.
That looks cool. Is it Impossible Mission? Because that's what's coming up when I popped it in.
Yep.
Gotcha.
Yep.
That looks really cool. It looks like the
Mission Impossible.
You did, and that's why I was like, oh, dun, 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 dun. It's okay. No, that looks really fun. It looks like, I don't want to say it's almost like a Spy versus Spy, because you have this whole kind of screen with different floors on it, and it looks pretty intricate too. It's pretty.
And it was known because it was known so well, and it freaked people out because when you first start the game, it's the sound clip that says, stay a while, stay forever, and then when you die, he screams as he falls down a pit. At first it made me laugh when I was a kid, and that's what I played played it for at first. But then and then I really got serious at it. I wanted to beat that game so bad.
Yeah, man, that's pretty cool. That looks really cool. That sounds fun. I think I have a C64 emulator somewhere. I gotta start looking at these games, and don't have much experience with it. So, do you actually own a Commodore 64 now?
I have two of them.
Nice, and they work. Disk drives work and everything, huh?
So,
cool.
One of them I have replaced the motherboard with a Gideon's Logic Ultimate 64 board that works on an FPGA.
Okay.
And so that has drive emulation built in, and then I have technically two actual ones, and they're both very finicky. So
okay, yeah.
So I tend to use the Commodore with the Ultimate 64 board, which is right above my head right at the moment.
Very nice. That's awesome, man.
This week on the Computer Chronicles, the hottest new computer games. Think you could have prosecuted OJ better than Marcia and Chris? Now you can be the prosecutor in a great new game called In the First Degree. Did you like Back to the Future? Did you watch Quantum Leap? Do time travel with a terrific new game from Sanctuary Woods called Buried in Time. If you like robot battle games, we'll show you the coolest one of them all, Mech Warrior 2. Plus, Sierra Online's Roberta Williams joins us for a look at her great new game, Phantasmagoria. A preview of new Windows 95 games, Finding Gamers on the Imagination Network, plus my pick of the week looks at PlayStation versus Saturn. All this plus gaming on the net, this week's news, next on the Computer Chronicles.
Another one that comes to mind when it comes to these CD-based games, I never owned it, but I had a friend who did and really loved it. And it's got some controversy behind it because it is actually pretty scary and kind of gross. You ever play Phantasmagoria?
I have watched the playthrough, and I did have a friend that had a copy, and he showed me like the earlier on stuff, and I wasn't really a fan of the horror genre at that point in time. Like, he was really into the morbid stuff. Like, so he had Quarantine, which is like this car game where you basically run people over the whole time. But he had that as well. And I just was never drawn to it. It was too disturbing. But yeah, I even went on and watched a playthrough it on YouTube a couple years back. And I was like, boy, I'm glad I didn't play that one.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine as like a kid playing it. And I was in high school. So I was, kind of sort of handle that, as a kid. It wasn't like I was 10 or anything. But I had a buddy who had it and he loved it, and he was like
all the
super into it.
gruesome death scenes,
Yeah.
like if you don't rescue the lady from the chair, she gets chopped in half by a blade.
And it's not cheesy looking.
No,
like
it's not.
pretty grim. It's
The acting is
crazy.
regrettable, but
Oof, that's not good.
but there were some scenes where it was downright freaky.
Yeah, no, it's some really creepy imagery in that. I was just curious if you had experience. It also came in like a lot of discs.
Yes,
I
it
want to
did.
say 6. I want to say 6. I might be wrong on that, but I don't feel like looking it up. But
I don't either.
it came on a bunch of discs as it did during that era. Okay, that Phantasmagoria music is so over the top. I mean, that is like prepare for an epic adventure and really, really bad acting. I mean, it's actually embarrassing how bad that acting is. There's a lot of good videos out there of playthroughs. It's a good time. Speaking of good times, Andrew Craig returns to the show to talk about Phantasmagoria and other PC games he was really in love with back in ye older days. Andy returns to talk about his favorite game of all time, a game I could probably do an entire episode on if I really wanted to, and I may. If you'd like me to do a full episode on Andy's favorite game, let me know. agamerlooksat40@gmail.com. And then finally, the fellows from New Dad Gaming Podcast return to share with us the many ways game companies used to try to prevent us dirty, filthy thieves from stealing their games. Another one from that era that I had a friend play, I had a friend who had them, was Phantasmagoria. Do you remember that one?
I remember it, but I never played it.
Yeah, I didn't. I played a little bit at my friend's house. I do remember just being horrified at how violent it was. Like, I don't think I'd seen violence in a game like that.
Yeah, I was in the seventh guest camp.
Okay.
Of the horror PC games.
Never played Seventh Guest. I never had a computer that was good enough to run it. I had friends who had PCs that could run it.
That game is fantastic.
Yeah. Does it hold up today?
Not at all, but that's part of the joy of it. It's one of those things. It's like going back to you remember this cartoon from your childhood being just a beautiful cartoon, and then you go back and realize that like almost every shot is just a static frame with the mouth moving.
Yeah.
It's that. You can still love it, but recognize it's flawed.
That's pretty funny. Pretty good. Did you play any other PC games during that era? Like just stuff.
Not really. That was pretty much it. That was my focus. Was just I fell hard into point and click and TIE Fighter.
Yeah, TIE Fighter. Yeah, that's incredible. TIE Fighter was great back in the day. Again, not sure if it holds up now. I haven't played it in who knows how long, but yeah, TIE Fighter. That was a good one.
Well, super damn complex.
Right? I remember it being extremely complex.
Well, you had to control every aspect of your ship, from which direction the shields were pointing to which weapon type you were using at any given moment. Your thruster speed, your angle, your everything. I mean, it
was about as simulation as it gets, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I remember there were missions where you had to like disable a frigate, and if you got anywhere near it, it ran.
Oh.
And so you had to shoot at it from like miles away.
Wow.
And just predict where it was going to be to get your shot off and get enough shots off quick enough that you could disable it. It was just crazy. I have no idea how they thought that was a good idea to give kids.
But somehow they figured it out. I had my cousin always had a great PC, but he played it for Flight Simulator. He was super into Microsoft Flight Simulator, and Actually, he would play it like when he was like 11 or 12, and his dream was always to become an airline pilot. So he would play that thing constantly. And sure enough, now 20 years later, he's a commercial airline pilot,
Good for him.
Yep. And he'll credit Microsoft Simulator. He's like, yeah, that's how I learned it. And I remember playing it once, like, he would come, hey, check out this game. It's a fight simulator. You can fly a plane. And of course, me coming from, whatever, like, console Star Fox, I'm like, how do you do this? What? No, you check your gauges and you increase the throttle. You have to wait for it to go. I'm like, this is too boring. I can't do this. But man, he loves it. And like I said, he's a commercial airline pilot. So he figured out what he wanted. He figured out what he wanted to do early and did it.
Yeah, that's why I primarily stuck with consoles.
Yeah.
PC I saw is starting to go down the route of being overly complex.
Yeah, for sure.
Right, but now this like one thing I have to mention for you is my favorite game of all time is Diablo 2.
Ooh,
but
wow.
Diablo 1 has to be noted because it was the first time I played a true multiplayer game online where it really just worked. And Diablo 1, I was on a dial-up, sitting in my
Nice.
My dad had moved at the time, and we had an apartment. We had this room with like a kind of like as high updated as a computer you could have back then.
Nice.
And
nice.
Playing Diablo, man, or Diablo 2, like just hours on end. So
that's awesome, man. Diablo 2 is another one. I never got into those styles of games. That was never my thing. I have friends though who are obsessed with Diablo 2. That's another landmark title that definitely deserves some mention when you're talking about that PC gaming space. Did you guys ever play the LucasArts stuff or any of the Sierra point and clickers?
Yeah, if I can
throttle.
Yeah, if I can derail you guys for 1 second, because
go for it.
Because I do want to know if you had the same experience where, and I think they did this on some Sierra titles as well, but like the anti-piracy measures for these games was to like, hey, welcome to the title, like flip to page 32, and tell us what color like this is. Like that, I'm remembering that right? That's not a fever dream, is it?
No, that was definitely a thing.
That
the
was
anti-piracy stuff was crazy in the early PC days. Code wheels and
oh my god, that's right.
Things you had to like look through like red film on a red to like decode like just all these crazy anti-piracy things. Yes.
Okay, I'm not crazy. So, now, one of those things was definitely on full throttle, which Jeff, you were just about to mention to get back to it.
Yes, but hold on. With that cheating, not the cheating, but like the code wheel. So, funny story. The code wheel, I think Civilization had it. I remember playing that game a lot, and you had to look up in this thick manual about like, do this code wheel, figure out what this word is, and then you can play. My buddy's mom worked at the library, and she had full access to their photocopier. So she photocopied that entire manual along with the code wheel to give to me so that I could play.
That's amazing.
And that would cost like an arm and a leg if you had to photocopy in those days. Like, I don't know, it was like a quarter a page or whatever, but still, she got it all for free. And I got to play Civilization. That was like maybe that was my first piracy moment. Maybe like I just relived, like that was the day when everything turned.
Your mom was complicit.
That's
complicit in the thievery of Civilization.
Yes.
That's great.
You wouldn't download a car, Jeff. you wouldn't photocopy a car, Jeff,
That's
would you?
Oh, that's great. Oh, that's a memory.
Yeah.
You copying a VHS tape from your buddy to a grand larceny. Like Grand Theft Auto equals stealing a copy of Kiss of the Dragon from my buddy. Hear ye. A new podcast has entered the ring, and it's a doozy. Pay heed and respect to Gamers Week, a brand new show brought to you by the combined talents of Blue Williams, Ryan of Retro Game Brews, and world-renowned singer, impressionist, and game collector, Donnie G. Retro. This tenacious trio delivers weekly gaming news with a potent blend of comedy, insight, and good-natured ribbing. And at an hour per episode, it's easy to digest via your ear holes. Remember when I used to keep my shows to an hour? I don't. I have children. I remember next to nothing. In all seriousness, if you listen to this show, we all run in similar retro gaming circles, and Gamers Week feels like our podcast, something that was created for us. So if you haven't done so already, give this excellent new show a like, a listen, and a follow. Available on every pod player worth knowing. And if that wasn't enough Ryan talk, our favorite podcaster / rabble-rouser joins us for a lengthy conversation about some of the strange games in his collection. And yeah, it gets a little weird. You cite top of your PC list is probably one of mine as well, which was SimCity 2000. I adore SimCity 2000. I played that game to death. What was your experience with that game?
So it started off, of course, playing SimCity on Super Nintendo, and what a huge transition between SimCity and SimCity 2000. And just all of the customizable gameplay elements that you could put into it, all of the minor details that they added to the game that allowed you to interact with that world. You really did feel like you were like the mayor of this town that you were creating, and allowed me as a young person as well to start gaining some of those strategic skills that went along with it. Because again, as we kind of mentioned, and I think I've mentioned this every time we talk, is that you didn't have the internet at the time, realistically.
Right.
So you had to figure this stuff out on your own. My brother was way better at this game, though. So there was an element of me watching him play.
Sure, him building the cities and kind of working it out, yeah.
But just the element of the fact that it went into the future, so there was all of a sudden this cool technology piece to it, is like the Arcos as you got into it, so it got really, really good. And it just, the ability to replay it, because there were so many available maps, you could really challenge yourself, so it wasn't just like a one and done kind of thing. You would more than likely have many cities going at once to see kind of what tactics that you put into place were having the best effect long term.
Totally. Yep. And SimCity 2000, it really is that creation. It's one of those, another good example of creation software, because it's really kind of what it is, right? You're building the city, you're building these, the city, right? And I was always, I just wanted to make the city, and I wanted to make it as frictionless as possible. It was just for me, a big Lego set. So I'd put it on like easy mode, give me all the money, and let me just build this thing. And for me, it was like virtual Legos. I never really got into the challenge of it so much as just the joy of making a thing happen.
Sure.
So, but I think it's cool that you can do both things, right? You can really challenge yourself with a challenging map, that has lots of water on it, right? Or how do I build a big city with limited land space, and being really strategic on where you place your commercial zones. And yeah, man, I adore SimCity 2000. And of course, the original SimCity, for me, again, on Super Nintendo, was just amazing. But that was just a huge evolution and a huge leap. I also noticed in your list you have StarCraft. Were you a big StarCraft fan?
So big. Oh my
okay.
Goodness. Oh my
wow.
goodness.
Okay. I have a funny feeling I could do an episode just on StarCraft, because it's a game I know next to nothing about, but I love watching people play.
Oh my goodness.
I really love watching people play that game competitively, because I have no idea what's going on, but boy, it looks fun.
It's funny that you think about that, because I actually got back into playing it probably a year ago, and I played that for a good solid 4 months before I moved on to other things, but I was playing that even recently.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So what about that game endures?
So there's different elements to the game. You can play the single player campaign, which is great. It really holds up. It's the real-time strategy style game, so really, really, really fun. You get to play as 3 different races, so there is strategic elements that change between those based off of the different characters that you can create. The other part to that is the online element, which to me was the most appealing piece. So you can do it one of two ways. You can either do a standard battle in which you play against other players or the computer. That's up to you if you want to, work with a friend against the computer. But the computer, of course, is always terrible. But the other piece to this is this thing called user map settings. So what people do is they take the map creation portion of StarCraft and basically make up different games utilizing the characters, the layouts, the maps of the different elements of the game. And basically you can more or less create whatever you want. And the only limitation is kind of your imagination at points. So there were games like, for example, Tower Defense, I think was one of the first experiences for me with Tower Defense was with StarCraft, in which you would, there's a few different modes. You could be the Zerg and do what's called sunken defense. You could be the Terran and do marine defense. A lot of really cool stuff with that. The other, so one of the ones that I used to play a lot was, to my knowledge, Among Us before Among Us was a thing.
Really?
So you would play as a bunch of civilians, so you didn't have any weapons, and you were in this map, and you basically had to survive for like 15 minutes. One of the players was, of course, the killer, and they had a cloaked Dark Templar that walked around the map. And of course, they also had a civilian, so it wasn't immediately obvious who it was.
Right.
So you had basically, I think if I remember right, two civilians, and one of them had to survive in order for you to win. And so what was interesting about it, though, is that there was a lot of chat going back and forth, like, oh my God, I think it's OJ, or oh my God, I think it's Black.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So as a killer, if you really wanted to be proficient at what you did, you made it seem less likely that you were the killer. And they were like, oh man, you could private message somebody, like, meet me in the corner. And then you're like, oh, killed ya.
Oh, that's really good.
Yeah.
That's really good. Yep. Have fun. I didn't realize there was that much involved with it. And I just look at the competitive stuff and I find it fascinating, but I didn't realize it had those layers to it.
Yeah, and that's essentially what I ended up doing. Going back to it was playing with my brother and a few friends doing tank defense, which is another version of tower defense, and just going. If you win, you celebrate it, but let's go back in. Let's go back in. Let's go back in. So there is this, for some reason, this draw that keeps bringing you back, even if you do win. So
that is really, really interesting. That's cool. Mm-hmm. I love the fact that it still works. Like, it still works to this day. Continue that the formula still holds up. You mentioned theme park and theme hospital. I think I've heard of theme park. I have no idea what theme hospital is. What are those two things?
So they're both developed by a company out of the UK, if memory serves me correctly, called Bullfrog. And if you are familiar at all with Roller Coaster Tycoon, this was the grandfather of Roller Coaster Tycoon.
Okay.
So theme park was an excellent example. Again, it's a similar look and feel. Not look and feel, but similar gameplay elements to SimCity, where your ideal theme park, you have to create that in order to bring in as many people as possible, and then deal with a myriad of other things that are going on in the park, including negotiating salaries with your employees because they'll quit on you if you don't, and then dealing with accidents and making sure you have enough staff and that they're happy and everybody. So there's a lot of fun to it. It's not as, I would say, in depth, of course, as Roller Coaster Tycoon is now, or customizable, but of course that's, I think, the difference, right? This is the SimCity to Roller Coaster Tycoon is the SimCity 2000, if you will.
Yeah.
Theme Hospital is a really, really quirky, fun game.
Yeah, I can't imagine what this is.
So you run, of course, you are the administrator of a hospital, and you build out different rooms, and you add different equipment, you hire different staff, and then people come into your hospital with different ailments. And so they're really funny as well. So there's the sense of humor with this game is really great. So for example, one of my favorites is called bloaty head syndrome, in which people walk in with this like enormously bloated head, and the cure for this ailment is to take this machine that you buy that pops their head. Their head completely deflates like a balloon. and then they blow it back up with a little hose.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
Oh, this sounds great.
Yeah.
This sounds awesome. I'm concerned, like, okay, are you gonna be like, like surgeries and stuff? Like, well, I didn't spend $5,000 on the fanciest laser tools, so I guess this person's heart's gonna stop. Oh no, it's just inflating and deflating heads? Okay, cool. I'm down with this. This is great. This sounds very good. I love this. That's awesome, man.
If you have not played it, I highly recommend it just for the
I gotta find this somewhere. I'm sure it's somewhere out there in the world I can check out. Awesome. And at the bottom of your list here, you have two titles I've never really heard of: Quest for Fame and Slingo. Okay. I don't know what either of those things are.
So Quest for Fame is a game that I've talked about, I think, in a few other contexts. But as a kid, I really wanted to get into playing a guitar. So my father was like, no, I know what you're going to do. We're going to spend hundreds of dollars on a guitar. You're going to play it for a week and then get bored with it and move on. So I don't know how it was on his radar at the time, but he, for Christmas, picked me up this game called Quest for Fame, which was a game that was created with Aerosmith in mind. So if you want to think about it, to me was my first ever time playing a rhythm game. It was basically Guitar Hero before Guitar Hero was a thing.
Okay.
And what it came in the package, of course, was, a 3.5 floppy that you would plug into your computer. And then it came with this plastic guitar pick that had a wire on it that would connect to the back of your computer. If I remember right, it was like the AV slot that would go back to there. Very bulky, heavy wire to it. And the pick itself inside had this sensor that would recognize, whether or not you were strumming it. And then on the instructions on it, they suggested that you pick up a tennis racket so that you could strum against the tennis racket. So
because everyone has a tennis racket
just lying around, right?
Sure.
Wait, I got to buy more equipment to play this game.
Okay.
So my father's deal was, during Christmas, all right, if you can master this game, I'll buy you a guitar. So I did. I jumped full board into it. You start off in your room with all of these, of course, metal posters on the wall, and everything is kind of grungy looking. And if you do well enough, some guy kicks in your door and is like, "Hey, come hang out with us. We're starting a band." Which interesting.
That's how that works, right?
Of course. And then you kind of do the natural progression of what a musician would go through. So you start off with a band that's kind of awful, and the music that they play is it's like Aerosmith adjacent. Right?
Okay.
And then you find your way, going to jazz clubs. Then all of a sudden you're like a bassist for a jazz group. And then eventually what you do is you get discovered by Aerosmith, and then you go to the recording studio. And then they are so impressed with you that all of a sudden you're now in a stadium playing to, hundreds of thousands of people.
How fun is that?
So,
that sounds amazing. I love the fact that, like everybody's first foray into music or playing in a band, it starts with a home invasion. You just break down the door. Yeah, right? Every time. It's fine. Just come on in. I actually looked this up a little bit as you were talking. This looks amazing. I love the graphics. Are kind of like these old school digitized characters. Yep. I love the fact you start in a garage and the garage door is actually open to the street.
Yep.
Because you want to hear because you want everyone to hear the power of your rocking. Clearly, you just leave this thing open and go to town. And I found a print ad that would have been in a magazine of some sort.
Oh, that's great.
And I'm just going to try to describe this to you. It's a white background. It's a kid kind of looking up at a camera, standing on the floor.
Yep.
He's got a backwards hat. He is holding the aforementioned tennis racket and the pick with the wire coming out of it to the back of the computer with two little speakers on the ground. And he has this look on his face which is, I can only describe as just doe-eyed dullard, just looking at you with this vacant gaze of. I started this sentence thinking I could describe it, and now I don't think I can. It just has this look of mouth agape, kind of sullen-eyed, yeah, man, and it is just glorious. It is all of this is great.
Please send that to me because I will probably print that out and get it framed.
I will send that to you via Twitter post haste.
Love it.
Yeah, man, that is really, really good.
And actually, I picked this game up recently. I bought a sealed copy of it. So
did you really? That's awesome.
It's sitting on the top of my game shelf right now. So there's part of me that wonders, should I leave it in the sealed package or should I pop this baby open and try to play it again?
I don't know. I mean,
the one thing I'm afraid of is it's not going to live up to my nostalgic memory.
I'd be afraid it wouldn't work on modern hardware.
You would have to jump through so many hoops to get it to work, for sure.
Fire up DOSBox and then, plug in that thing to a serial port on your motherboard, maybe. I hope you don't have a serial port on your motherboard. I sure don't. And you have a fancy computer. I know you don't. So I don't know. And then have DOSBox assign that serial port to a fake... No, I think YouTube videos would be the way to go.
For sure.
to go down that rabbit hole. But yes, I will send that to you. And then one final thing you had on your PC list. What is a Slingo?
So that's later in the 90s when the internet was starting to become a thing. This was something that we played, at least in my group of friends, fairly regularly. This was an online game that's a mixture between slots, bingo, and like the show Press Your Luck. So big bucks, no whammies.
Okay.
And so what you would do is you would sign into a match. It was an online match against basically 20 people. And then what it would do is that you would have your own unique board. And each round was the desire to remove sections of the board to basically say, I've got that thing, like in bingo, right? But what would happen is that each time, each new round, it would spin like a slot machine and provide you with either, a yes or a no, but you had to physically click on it. So if you weren't paying attention or you didn't get it done in a certain allotted time, it would, of course, not give you access to that. The other part was that if you got a devil symbol, the devil symbol would steal all of your points, more or less. What was cool about it is that you could play with friends. So it was something where you could log into the same game as your friends. It wasn't just something that was done with random. The other part to it was that there was this strong language that people would use playing it. So there was like symbols for, got a good round, or like nothing. It would be like shuffle to say. The other one was if you got a devil, there was because of course they would block you if you swore. So you would say ducking fevel.
Yeah.
And so it was just this fun thing that, most of the time you would do it almost every night with your friends there was a stretch that everybody was playing for a really long time with that. And, of course you had certain friends who were much more skilled at it or lucky. I'm not sure which, but, the point was to try to get your board cleared early enough, because that means you could accumulate a whole bunch of bonus points. And then there was like a high score system. So if you were really lucky and good at the same time, you could potentially be on the high score for the week or the month. And you're the coolest kid in school,
Absolutely. And that's it. Forget it. I mean, you got your Jenkos, your Airwalks, and you got top marks on Slingo. I mean, listen, that's it. I mean, valedictorian's got nothing on you. What seems cool about this, though, is it seems sounds like there's a bit of randomness almost to this.
Totally.
Which is cool, like almost like a Mario Party where anybody can win depending on the role of the slots.
Exactly.
Which is cool. I mean, I have my issues with Mario Party, but it's just
me too.
But it sounds like it has a bit of that kind of style to it.
And I think the biggest part of it was the community aspect, the fact that you weren't just playing this by yourself. There was a whole bunch of other people, and that was relatively a new thing too. Playing on the internet, playing games on the internet. My goodness, all of a sudden, if I remember right, this was still going on until recently. I want to say in the last 5 years, it finally went kaput, but people were still playing it.
Wow, 5 years ago. That's crazy. That's cool. And now, to close out our journey into the early 90s PC games, I wanted to spend a strange amount of time on a game that was formative in my life. This is a game that my brother and I played quite a bit. We were both terrible at it. And it's one of those titles that when I had these conversations with people, I always brought it up. Always mentioned this one game, and almost nobody knew about it. Almost everybody was like, well, I've never heard of that game. And that's fine. These things can be just ours. But two people did. One was Adam, and the second, Justin from Baseball and Whatever. Both of these gentlemen actually knew what I was talking about. So, to close out our episode, I'd like to spend a solid 15 minutes talking about a game my brother and I adored. We're going to start with my brother as we recollect about this game, go to Adam as he shares his insights, and then finally Justin, who is right alongside me in my very odd fandom. Let's start our engines.
And now, VWBT is proud to present the show that squashes reality like a bug. That's right, you better be ready to Mega Race.
Now, before I get started with anything, I want to make sure I have time to talk about one game in particular in the PC world. And this is a game that I think, in our family at least, was pivotal. This was a pivotal, important game that we all experienced, at least you and I experienced, to great lengths. And that game, of course, is Mega Race.
Yeah.
We need to talk about Mega Race. I ask anybody I have a PC conversation with, do you know Mega Race?
So
and
wild.
only one person has said yes. Everyone else has said, I think so. I've heard of it.
I was just, it's so weird you bring that up. I was just watching the video footage on YouTube. Someone uploaded all the acting moments from Megaspace, and I was just watching it on my Apple TV. Like, time never passed. It was so weird to watch it.
That's so funny. Well, it's a good thing you did that, because I prepared 3 questions, a little Mega Race quiz for you.
Oh,
to
boy.
see, to test your know-how. But since you've already kind of prepped for it, this is great. So, question number 1. What is the name of the host?
People wonder if he's real. What's his name, though?
Oh, no!
Oh, no. I don't remember his name.
Okay.
I remember him introducing himself. People wonder if I'm real. And then he does all his little spiels.
Literally, they plucked a crazy man. And actually, before you do that question, let's set up Mega Race a bit, because people may not know what it is. Mega Race is a dystopian racing game where you play as the Enforcer.
Yes.
And the idea is that you're going around this virtual track, taking out virtual gangs that may or may not really kill you. And it's kind of like a mix of like was it Roadrunners? Is that the game from behind? Like, it's a behind the view car game where you can shoot and evidently use missiles. I've never used it or know how to use it. You can, basically, the idea is to take out everybody on the road in this speed gang before you complete these laps. And there's lots of little gimmicks, like you have a thrillometer where you have to like fill the meter and keep everybody excited.
Keep the audience excited. And you also rack up points for more creative kills. So not just shoot, you can shoot and you can run out of ammo, but you just want to bang them into the walls and try to find creative ways to kill them at the same time. Yeah.
Right.
So.
Yeah. So that's kind of the setup, and it's all narrated by this crazy man that they plucked off the street, I think, in an oversized blue coat.
Yeah.
Named Lance Boyle.
Yeah.
That's the answer to question number 1.
Yeah, I was trying to think Lance. I was thinking Lance. Yeah.
And here's your mega host, Lance Boyle.
Hey, welcome to Mega Race, the action show where violence only happens once every few seconds. Hi, I'm Lance Boyle, and people often wonder if I'm real.
And Lance it's over the top, it's sarcastic.
Very sarcastic, yeah.
It is kind of wonderful. I recommend, I actually downloaded an emulator. I downloaded and installed a 3DO emulator to play it.
Oh, sweet.
Because it's on 3DO.
It was, yeah.
Boy, is that game still kind of rough to play. However, there's still
very
a lot of charm. Very ambitious.
Yeah.
So, Lance Boyle was the host. Number 2, what was the name of the TV network that you're on?
WBTV, or Virtual World Broadcast. Is that what it was?
Yeah, you got it. Virtual World Broadcast Television.
Oh my God!
So,
yeah, he says it really fast.
WBT.
Yeah, he says it really fast sometimes.
And then this one's the hard one. Can you name? There's 5 gangs in this world
yeah.
that you play against over and over again. Can you name 3 of the 5 gangs?
No, I don't remember the names. I remember the stages. I remember like there was the underwater one, which was really cool looking.
Yeah,
there was like the desert, like the moon one, but the gang names.
The Wasteland.
Yeah, the Wasteland. Yeah, like some of them were like I don't know, like kind of modeled after Hell's Angels, but
kind of. Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm not quite sure the actual name.
That's okay. So you have the Sharks.
The Sharks.
The one I always remember is the Scabs.
The Scabs.
Because the way he says it, Scabs.
Yeah.
The Vultures. Big Bob and the Power Tools.
Mm-hmm.
And King Cool and the Masterclass.
Awesome.
Yeah. So what was your recollections of Mega Race? I mean...
Well, I remember the Vultures now for sure. I don't know the way he says it. The Vultures.
The Vultures. The Vultures.
It's such a hammy performance, but it's perfect.
It really is.
It's kind of it has I get a very big RoboCop vibe. That cynical sort of future, life is cheap, but we do things for the thrills, kind of like Metropolis sort of thing. And I get that vibe, like the newsreels in RoboCop. I get that vibe for this board game, for this game show. Yeah, no, I remember. It's weird because we got our first PC growing up, and it had a CD-ROM, which was a big deal for the time, and it was a Packard Bell. For those listening, I guess they've become Hewlett-Packard in some capacity, and it came with a whole box of CD-ROMs, and I think somehow you got Mom or asked Mom or ordered an extra CD, which was the Mega Race. I don't think that came with it, but I'm not sure.
I don't know. I seem to think it did because it's a weird outlier.
Yeah.
It's not a game that should appear in the family entertainment pack that comes with your 486, Packard Bell with 4 megs of memory, and I don't remember the hard drive side. It might have been like 400 meg, but I think that's wrong.
Yeah.
It's with the dual speed CD-ROM drive, which was the hotness.
Yes. You upgraded it. Yeah. I remember.
Well, I upgraded it it came with a dual speed. I never upgraded the CD-ROM drive. I did upgrade the modem.
Yes.
Because it was a 2400 baud modem.
Yeah.
And I plopped the 56K in there, and that we were off. Oh yeah, we were off to the races. And I also increased the RAM to 20.
Oh, yeah. That's right.
And after that, those games ran great because Mega Race barely ran on that thing. I mean...
It crashed a lot.
It constantly crashed. Once I upped it to 20, then it was like, oh, this is how it's supposed to run. But it came with the pack, I'm pretty confident. So Mega Race was such a formative title. It was... Again, I remember being really bad at it. I remember being okay until I got to a certain point, and then, once I ran out of energies for the weapon, that was basically it. So it is fun to watch those run-throughs of people who are actually really, really good at it.
If you have a hard hat at home, you may want to put it on now as Mega Race visits Factoryland. This speedway we call Industrial Park. It's a name rich with the atmosphere of burning truck tires. All around us are armies of robots making armies of robots making armies. Hey, there's one over there. Hey, you! Get back to work or I'll take out my can opener! Yeah, those guys just love it when you laugh at them.
I had a game. So I had a Packard Bell computer, and the Packard Bell came with a bunch of software, as it did back in those days of CD games. It came with a Grolier's encyclopedia. It came with like an atlas. It came with like a Sports Illustrated disc. It had like, video clips of really cheesy bad video clips of the sports of the day. All sorts of things. It came with some games. 3D Dino Adventure comes to mind. A Human Body. And it came with this game called Mega Race. Are you familiar with Mega Race?
I think I played Mega Race, but not on the PC. I had a friend who had a 3DO. And that's where I played Mega Race.
Oh my God. Is Mega Race on the 3DO?
It is. It's on the Sega CD as well.
Every time I talk about this, I feel like I've had a fever dream. I've just never, oh my gosh, it is Mega Race. I'm so good. I'm so happy this exists on 3DO. Mega Race, the only reason I bring it up is because some people I say, and they're like, I don't know what that is. And those who do remember it fondly and strangely. It is
a very odd game.
very, very odd game to put in free with your computer from Packard Bell. Like, it's the weirdest choice for a free pack-in.
Well, Packard Bell got weirder as they gone on, too. They had started including stuff like Silent Service, and then, do you remember the Journeyman project?
I don't.
That was a Windows point-and-click adventure that was just so out there.
But anyway, Mega Race is a strange game. It's got a very creepy, terrifying narrator who looks like they just kind of pulled off the street, put an oversized blue coat on as he's like telling you all these things about the cars. It's not a great game, but I try to describe this. So I think anyone listening should just check out Mega Race.
Think of it
is a very strange game.
Think of it like your car is sitting on top of a track that's been kind of created in the style of a movie. It's not like a rendered track. It's more like a film clip that you're driving on.
Yeah, it's a good way of putting it. Yeah, it's kind of like, it's got like a film style to it. It's also, the idea is that you're playing in this virtual world, and you're competing for prizes on the Mega Race show. And there's a thrillometer. You have to try to. So if you just sit there driving and drive around people, your thrillometer doesn't go up. If you blow people up and smash them into the walls,
it's like Arnold Schwarzenegger's Running Man.
Yes, very Running Man. Yeah. So Mega Race is definitely a formative title.
Wow! Is that corkscrew for real, or is the pilot slumped lifeless over the controls? Well, if he ever wakes up, remind me to fire him. But seriously though, folks, it's thanks to robots that people like you can spend all day watching VWBT. Just don't give them the right to form labor unions. That's all I'm saying. Who's gonna make you so? You ever heard of Factoryland? Big Bob and the Power Tools, that's who, baby. These are red-blooded men with beer guts and sweaty heads. They don't like robots, and they don't like robot lovers like you. Uh-oh, Big Bob's eyes are getting very close together. That's bad news for you, Enforcer.
I have a weird affinity for this game. I need to hear what you think about this.
I am
strange title.
So glad that someone else knows what I'm talking about. I thought for sure when I included that, when we were kind of corresponding back and forth, I'm like, he's not going to have any clue what I'm talking about. This random race game.
I'm yeah, dude, New Gun, Wolfenstein,
Mega Race? Yeah.
What? Oh boy.
Yeah.
We need to talk about Mega Race.
So my uncle, he was the one that kind of built the PC for us. And I'm assuming it had to be something comparable to what you had. Because, I don't remember it being anything too crazy when we had it. But I do remember Windows 3.1 being on it. But so I just remember him showing us Mega Race and seeing the full motion video with, I can't remember the name of the main character. Is it Lance something?
Lance Boyle.
Okay.
Because mid-90s.
Yes. And I just remember he had that like blue, it almost looked like a blue like crushed velvet suit and like a purple dress shirt underneath. I don't know why I remember this so vividly, but I do. But anyway, I remember my uncle showed it to me and he's like, look at this. They can put like movies in games now. And I'm like, graphics can't get any better. This is all it's going to be from here on out. It's just movies, And I was so astonished by the way they did that and kind of made it futuristic, where I think there's a couple cutscenes where like it looks like families are watching this and there's commercials interspliced in between. And, then you get to the actual racing game. And I remember it being decent. I remember there was a decent amount of cars. You had weapons, which to me was really novel because I didn't grow up with an SNES. Let me try that again. Didn't grow up with one of those till probably about 2000 or so. So the whole Mario Kart thing was lost on me at this point. But being able to, race and shoot, your lasers, missiles, was there mines? I don't remember. But I was just blown away. And I remember I would get so into it. My dad bought a special joystick for us. I want to say it was like a Flight Man. It was Flight something, but it was navy blue and with like yellow trim. Probably way too nice for just a family PC. And I remember I would get so into the game, like I would hold the joystick down and like tilt it sideways because I was convinced that made my car go faster. And eventually I broke the joystick doing that so much. So, there wasn't a lot of Mega Race playing after that. But I wouldn't say the game is perfect by any means, but like you, I have a special affinity for that game that I constantly look back fondly on for sure.
I actually have I actually stole. I can't steal something that was mine, but
sure.
I took that pack of CDs from my mom's house. I found it last year, brought it here back to my place, and with the magic of DOSBox. And like some wizardry for this, I actually have a computer with a CD drive still in it. I don't know why, but it's there for that purpose. I was able to play Mega Race for the first time in probably 15 years. It's not a great racing game.
No, I kind of had a feeling.
But it's fun to watch. Let's boil. They kind of pulled the guy out of the street and they put like a suit that's way too big on him and just gave him a bunch of lines, and
I feel like
it works somehow, some way.
I feel like at some point I went on IMDb to try and find out who that actor was, and I don't think I had any luck. I honestly don't remember. It's been so long, but I would love to know what that guy's still doing these days, because his persona in that game is burned into my brain. So
yep. And his performance is great. He's so over the top. He's fun. It's great. So.
That might be the best thing about the game, which probably isn't a good way to sell it. But yeah, so.
If you're listening to this and you don't want to fiddle around with DOSBox to get Mega Race to play, just go online. I'm sure there's a playthrough. A playthrough of Mega Race. Go check it out.
For sure.
It'll take you 45 minutes and it'll be a good laugh. As I've been walking back through this episode, editing and trimming and editing and adding nonsensical Mega Race references, I got to thinking about how it was back in the day when I got my first PC. And I realized that I had consoles. I had an NES, a Super Nintendo, probably had my N64 by then, maybe not. And all of those things were there to play games. That's their whole point. But my parents didn't buy a PC for me to play with. It was there to do book reports and print out spreadsheets and maybe some light banking, artistic software, Paint and Corel and all these different art softwares. And eventually there'd be America Online, and getting email and IMs. But this thing was never there as a gaming device. Yet somehow, some way, everybody started using it as one. Maybe it was something simple like Solitaire or Minesweeper or Ski-Free. That was mine. I adore Ski-Free to this day. And some others use that double-speed CD-ROM jive for Doom and Wolfenstein and Commander Keen and those titles. Playing games on the PC felt almost wrong. Like we weren't supposed to be using this device for that reason. And for that reason, it was cool. It's almost we weren't allowed to do it. This device, brought in at great expense by our parents, was being used for something we already had things to do with. We had those consoles. Our parents bought us the toys, and we were using our family computers like our consoles. And I think that was part of the magic. For those of us who played PC games, it was beyond our consoles. We could take the thing apart. We could upgrade the parts. We knew how everything worked. And we were doing things on it our parents didn't think we could ever do. And as we all know, in our lives, it's sometimes more fun to do things that you can't do as opposed to the things you can. Thank you so much for listening to this edition of A Gamer Looks at 40. If you want to support the show, the best way you can do so right now is joining our Patreon. Patreon.com/agamerlooksaat40. We have a variety of tiers at a variety of dollar amounts with a variety of rewards and perks for as little as $2. You can join the show, be a member of the program, and just support us in a monetary way along with your listenership, if you can do so. Just be aware, if you haven't heard the intro episode that has a lot of this in it, no episode of A Gamer Looks at 40 will ever be behind a paywall. These episodes are for everybody, free of charge. It's never, ever, ever going to happen. Outside of that, ratings and reviews on your pod player of choice are always greatly appreciated. If I've earned it, and only if I've earned it, 5-star ratings really help expose the show to a wider audience, so please do that. And if I haven't earned it, then let me know on Twitter or via email or Facebook at agamerlooksat40, again 40 at gmail.com, or on Twitter. Thanks again for listening to the show, and continue staying awesome.